Alright, well, hello everyone. It is Dodger coming back to you once again with coverage of Grand Prix Kamloops. And this is a quarterfinal match between BluesEclipse, who is on blue-black Vedlinn Ross control, and CanterburyEgg, who is on the kind of like shops, artifacts stuff deck. Actually, I think this is like the third or fourth time I've actually ended up covering CanterburyEgg's deck, which is pretty funny, I guess. But like, basically, a quick synopsis of both decks. Blues' deck is pretty straightforward. It's kind of just playing a bunch of like generically good blue and black cards, and like, it's also got Vedlinn Ross as like a way to generate extra value with the free spells that you might end up casting, or like spells you might end up casting from areas other than your hand. And then besides that, it's just kind of like a pretty generic blue-black control deck, I would say, with some spicy inclusions like Aurora right here. CanterburyEgg's deck is, if you've ever played shops in Kin Magic, it's kind of like that, where it's basically just playing a bunch of artifacts and colorless lands, and it uses a particular card called Kel'Thraz's Workshop to produce a lot of mana if you have a bunch of artifacts in play. So Egg is able to use Wilted Lotus to ramp out a turn 2 Intrepid, which is definitely a very big deal, I would say. Probably the best, or close to the best turn 2 that Egg can have. I know that Glistening Chalice can also enable a lot of pretty nutty stuff. Important to note is that Egg can actually play the Brine Fleet Bay next turn and immediately turn on Kel'Thraz's Workshop after playing the Glistening Chalice. So Egg could go Brine Fleet Bay, tap 2 lands, Glistening Chalice, and then use the Chalice and the Workshop to cast the Zadina Bazaar and the Warded Tome very easily. So like, Egg could just play a lot of cards here if that's what the modus operandi is. Now, Blues actually does have a pretty unfortunate hand, given that there's 3 Cane Dancers and nothing to actually hit except for a Destructive Ambition, which actually hits barely any cards in Egg's deck at all, given the fact that almost all of Egg's cards are artifacts. So it will hit this Moonlight Sanctum if Egg ever decides to cast it, but again, Moonlight Sanctum is probably the worst card in Egg's deck, so it's not like a huge deal, I would say. So Chalice coming down right here and not being countered is pretty big. One thing that is of note is that Blues does have this Endless Disco. Okay, so it looks like Egg is making the play that I suggested, or sort of. So it looks like Egg is choosing to hold up the Chalice to reduce to increase the cost of Blues mana Blue spells next turn, which I think is a totally reasonable line. Egg doesn't really get a lot out of like forcing out Warded Tome early, given that Egg has like a ton of mana. So I think this line is probably preferable. Blues is going to pick up the Intrepid and another land from the Endless Disco at end of turn. Makes sense. Now, Glistening Chalice actually doesn't reduce the cost of artifact spells, so Intrepid is still playable here for Blues, which is a pretty big deal. I have to imagine that Blues is going to do it, because nothing that Blues can hold up here is really going to matter, except for maybe the Exant, so it's possible that Blues is going to... Okay, so Blues is actually going to cycle the Weathered Slums, which I think is fine. Like, you don't have to play Intrepid here. You can just play a land and hold up Exant to try to get rid of the Intrepid. And yeah, like, Egg will be able to sack it to Zadina Bazaar, but it's better than nothing. Why did Blues end up discarding Destructive Ambition? I'm a little confused on this. Oh, it was because Blues had 8 cards in hand. Okay, never mind. Yeah, it makes sense to discard that. I mean, it's basically a dead card in this matchup. Okay, so we'll have to see what Egg does here. There are a lot of lines, most of which include probably just vomiting as many artifacts into play as possible. Egg can actually go double Chalice here and reduce the cost by 2. It makes sense to just drop Warded Tome first, though, because, like, you might as well just see what your next card is before you commit to using Chalice on your turn. Also smart to use to draw the cards before you play your 4th land, in case you get something more relevant than Perilous Passage. Like, maybe you get, like, Brilliant Sanctum, and then you want to cast... Or Brilliant Academy, and then you want to cast Moonlight Sanctum. Okay, so we're getting Chalice number 2. So Egg's going to be able to play both the Dina Bazaar and the Lodestone Golem, because this is 2 mana plus 3 mana now, and then if Egg uses the Chalice, it's going to be 1 mana plus 2 mana, which both can be cast off of that 1 Workshop activation. So that's a pretty big deal. This is a pretty huge turn for Egg, I gotta say. I think if I were Egg, I would probably go for this. I don't think that Chalicing on Blues' turn holds... Actually, it does prevent, like, a Vedlinn Ross cast, I guess. I guess from Egg's perspective, like, there's a reasonable amount of value that's to be had from holding up Chalice here. So just casting Lodestone Golem, and then you don't really need, like, 2 Zadina Bazaars in play, per se. And you can always just play that next turn. So I think this is a fine play. Yeah, I'm assuming Egg's going to go for the attack with the Intrepid here. Okay, we have a response. Exant is going to come out. The awkward thing is that if Egg really wants to save Lodestone Golem, Egg can just activate Intrepid again. It's not like you can only activate Intrepid's ability once per turn. Oh, okay, so Egg's actually going to crew the Brine Fleet Bay using the Lodestone Golem. And then sack the Brine Fleet Bay. I think that it actually is the best play, because Intrepid and Lodestone Golem... Like, Intrepid has evasion, and Lodestone Golem reduces the cost of the opponent's spells. Plus, Brine Fleet Bay is like... If you leave the Brine Fleet Bay and sacrifice one of those two, it's like you've gone down to, like, 1 threat that can attack, but this way you've actually got 2 now. So yeah, this makes a lot of sense as a play for Egg, I think. I don't think Egg should use the Chalice to play the Bazaar, but he could if he wants to. Okay, looks like that's gonna happen. Okay. Yeah, I think this is fine. One important thing to note is that Egg actually does have lethal on board, because we have the 5 damage plus 4 plus 7, so that would be 16 damage total. If Blues just, like, did nothing, but Blues does have effects, so we're going to see some of that happen right now. Most likely with... So I think Blues made a pretty big misplay here. And here's why. Because Blues chose to play the Flooded Morass before casting Intrepid. This means that Blues actually, since there are 2 Flooded Morasses here, Blues does not have Wanderlust, and Blues cannot achieve Wanderlust by playing the land that Intrepid tutors. I think if Blues had played the Intrepid first, and then played whatever land that Blues wanted to tutor, that would have actually, given Blues the ability to block with the Intrepid. Yeah, Egg's going to get another free card off sacking the Tome. And Tinkerer's Tool is a really great draw. If you watched Egg's deck in action in previous videos, like, you know that Tinkerer's Tools is actually very oppressive to play against in a lot of cases, and can be very just, like, surprising in the kind of things it can do. It becomes very hard to interact with your opponent at all if they have 2 or more open mana, because whenever you want to try to kill something, it can instantly become a certain other thing in Egg's deck. Sometimes it can be like Serpent of Armageddon. Sometimes it can be like, I don't know, Egg can just randomly pull out a Assimilated Divinity. So, yeah, definitely, I think Egg should actually be able to just go for the win here, because Blues only has 1 mana available. Egg can activate both Glistening Chalices, as well as having the Lodestone Golem in play. There's no way Blues is... If Egg just activates both Glistening Chalices and Blues doesn't respond and they're resolved, I think Egg should just activate Clock Tower and go for the win. Okay, so Egg is actually reducing the cost of an artifact. I think this is fine. It looks like Egg is digging for more cards. I don't know if Egg like sees the line to just end the game, or if Egg realizes that Intrepid is actually not online to block. Okay, there you go. Yeah, so unfortunate. That one play by Blues, playing the Intrepid after playing the land that happened to have the same name as another land, means that you actually won't be able to get the Wanderlust activated. Which, you know, it is a mistake that can happen. And it's not like the worst mistake in the world. Like, Blues was probably going to lose that game anyway, just from like Blues draw being poorly matched up to Egg's deck with what were the 3 Cane Dancers, and then the only target for the Cane Dancer was Destructive Ambition. So I wouldn't say that like Blues really punted the game there, because I would say that Egg was very likely to win it anyway. But yeah, I think sometimes it's kind of hard to remember that like Intrepid is not just always on, because usually people build their decks in such a way that like it's really easy for it to always be on. But that still means like occasionally, if your draw is wrong, or if you forget about the fact that you need to hit Wanderlust, it can make it a little awkward sometimes. But, you know, it's not too big a deal. So, if we're going into Game 2, I should have pulled this up beforehand. Whoops. Oh, I had this already. Okay, waiting for the MSEM website to load. Alright. So, first of all, we're going to take a look at Blues' deck. I think the easiest cut is for sure Destructive Ambition. Card's basically dead. Besides that, I think Blues needs to be able to interact early on, and I think that Blues is like kind of value generating but expensive cards like Vedlinn Ross, Aurora, possibly even Ephemeral Adept, all need to come out in favor of cards that can actually like be cast early. And have an effect in the game. I think something like Essence Scatter is pretty important. Singularity's Grasp is a great tool. Being able to wipe out a bunch of non-creature artifacts at once can be very good for clearing the board. Blues just needs to survive long enough to actually like be able to cast this. Beyond that, like there's a bunch of like decent tools like Strike from the Shadows. I think Mirror Gate is actually a good one here, because you might be able to turn off Egg's for example, Workshop. And also, Mirror Gate is pretty much dead for Egg, because Egg's lands all tap for colorless. So, like, I guess Mirror Gate can also tap for colorless, but okay, so that's not that bad. But yeah, I think Antithesis is probably not going to do it. It's a little too expensive to actually get down and have an impact. I think Blues should probably bring in... I think Abscond is also good, just like in case you need... It's not great, but like if you need an extra thing. I don't know. I think Blues just needs to curve down, or like slim the curve down. Okay. Whoops. I apologize. As for Egg, I'll just go over this really quickly. Whoops. Okay, so I think Egg's deck is honestly pretty well set up. Blues deck is kind of exactly the kind of deck that Egg wants to face against. It interacts with a lot of like sorcery speed removal, like Descent on the Helpless, and oftentimes it's going to be looking to cast like more expensive cards. So Egg's tax effects can really have a big impact here. As for cards you want to bring in, I think Shining Crusader is something that Egg has brought in pretty much every matchup. I know Egg said that he wishes it were in the main deck, or he moved it to the main deck later or something. Besides that, I'm not really sure. I honestly feel like Egg has a pretty solid main for this matchup, so we'll just have to see how it goes. Blues was on the play, was able to get an early Endless Disco. So Blues actually brought in Potion of Inhibition, which I think is very smart. I did fail to mention this when I first looked at Blues sideboard, but one of the things that makes Egg's deck so annoying to play against is, in particular, Tinkerer's Tools. So being able to shut that off is very nice. It also does harm Intrepid, which, is a double-edged sword. Hurts both you and your opponent. Oh, this turn 2 Intrepid for Egg again. That is really not good news. So it turns out that didn't really end up mattering. Actually, so a very important thing, though, is that Blues does have the Abscond. And since Blues is on the play, Blues is going to be able to hit 4 mana before Egg does. And that should mean that Blues will be able to cast Abscond, targeting Egg's Intrepid, which is pretty huge. Okay, so Blues is going to grab Planet and Potion. Makes sense. Okay, let's see what Blues draws here. Another Endless Disco. It's a great draw. I think slamming Potion here is not the best. It's not awful. Like, just if you get that down now, then that Tinkerer's Tools would pretty much be turned off. Of course, we know that Tinkerer's Tools is not available to Egg right now. Oh, actually, very unfortunately, Egg is going to be casting Lodestone Golem next turn, which means that Blues is actually not going to be able to abscond the Intrepid. Because for that to happen, Blues would need to pay to cast Abscond for X equals 3, which would normally cost 4 mana, but the Lodestone Golem only costs 5 mana. This is just assuming that Egg decides to cast the Lodestone Golem, though. Perhaps Egg draws something that Egg wants to cast instead, and then it'll be like... Okay, so we saw the Shining Crusader. I think if I'm Egg, I almost always just cast the Lodestone Golem here. There is an Inquirer, which Egg might be tempted to cast that instead. So it looks like Blues opted not to cast the Potion, and instead hold up mana for Planet. I think that's probably the better play, as I said earlier. Okay, we're getting Lodestone Golem here. That is pretty unfortunate for Blues. That means Blues is not going to be able to ever abscond the Intrepid, because once Egg has Wanderlust active, if Blues tries to abscond Intrepid, Egg can just turn it into a creature in response. And then Abscond will fail to resolve because it only can target a non-creature permanent. Okay, so Blue certainly has plenty of cards. None of these cards are great here. So we're seeing the Planet in response, which makes sense. Seeing Wilted Lotus come down. I think Blues could pick up Exit here and then just immediately cast it. That's 3 mana. The reason why you'd want to immediately cast it is because... So actually, I think casting Exit here immediately is great, because what Egg will probably do is animate the Brinefleet Bay and then sack that, right? Or you get the Lodestone Golem in play. If Egg decides to animate the Brinefleet Bay, Intrepid will be offline for an extra turn, and then Blues will actually be able to abscond it. So, I guess from my outsider perspective, I think the best play for Blues is to go pick up Exant and then cast it. Of course, from Blues' perspective as a player, that might not be like on the forefront of their mind. Maybe Blues is looking to just play Vedlinn, or maybe cast another Endless Disco. Oh, okay, we have a false ping that Blues forgot. Okay, well, Hopefully this will be resolved soon with a judge. I'm guessing that Blues will just correct the life total and then receive a warning. But we'll have to see. So, yeah, I just want to real quick go over the potential lines that Blues could do here again. The way I see it, there are essentially 3 lines. One is to pick up the Exant and then either cast it immediately or try to hold it up. I think you definitely want to cast it immediately because if you hold it up and let your opponent go to main phase, then they can play a land. You can't respond to that, right? And then that means that all of a sudden Intrepid's online. And that just means it's another creature that, like, you might hit instead of the Lodestone Golem. And Lodestone Golem is like the priority target right now, right? So if Egg has, if you cast the Exant right now, Egg will either sack Lodestone Golem, which is a good outcome, or tap Lodestone Golem and crew the Brine Fleet Bay, sack that, right? So like, we already discussed why that's a good play too, because that'll allow the Abscond on the Intrepid. Another play here is to play Vedlinn. I don't think this is a good play, personally. Yes, you get to, you actually don't get to cast the Leitmotif because the Leitmotif will be taxed 1 by the Lodestone Golem. So I don't think playing Vedlinn here is a good play, but Blues could do it. It's not the worst. Actually, Blues literally can't even play it because it's not an artifact yet. So I apologize. I am making stuff up. Okay. Okay, it looks like... So Blues might be thinking about getting something from Endless Disco here. I believe Blues should get Exant and cast it. I believe that is the play. Okay, Blues is getting Exant. Now I hope Blues will immediately cast this. Yeah, okay. Cool, so Blues agrees with me this is the best play. Lodestone Golem is gone. Okay, so this does mean that that Abscond is not gonna be able to grab the Intrepid, which is certainly unfortunate. But getting that Lodestone Golem off the field is also something very good to do. I'm guessing Egg can untap, and Egg has access to 5, 6, 7 mana, so Egg could literally cast Spectral Skycruiser. That would be pretty funny. I think it might also be the right play. You could also just go Shining Crusader plus Inquirer if you wanted to. Hard to say which is like the better play. I think probably Shining Crusader plus Inquirer is the better play. Yeah, it looks like Egg is going to agree with me on that. So I did notice that Blues actually did not cast the second Endless Disco, or the third Endless Disco after Lodestone Golem was sacrificed. I think that's okay, but I think I would rather honestly just play this because the problem is none of these cards you're getting from Endless Disco are very good. Like, this isn't really what you want. You want like a Singularity's Grasp or something that can like actually, help you regain control of the board. And if you cast the Endless Discoveries, you're also going to get the Planet trigger right away. And plus, like, you don't know if you're going to be able to trigger Leitmotif for free because Egg might have another Lodestone Golem or a Chalice or something like that. So I think that if I'm Blues, I would rather cast the second Endless Disco once Egg decided to sacrifice the Lodestone Golem to the Exant. Okay, so we're going to see a Lotus deck. Makes sense. Okay, so Egg's probably just going to cast Inquirer. Yeah. Okay. I think Blues really needs to hit a Singularity's Grasp. I think that is the only way Blues gets back in this game. Actually, I actually noticed that Blues did not name green with the Nebula, so I actually take that back. That is not a line. Okay, Blues is scooping. Oof. Alright. Well, that is... That is the match already. Wow. Did Egg have lethal? 5, 9. Oh yeah, Egg did have lethal. That's funny. Oh no, actually, Egg just played the clock tower. Yeah, okay, so it looks like that would have been lethal if Egg had played the clock tower on the previous turn. But, you know, I think for Blues, the Singularity's Grasps probably should have come in. I'm guessing that they didn't, because Blues didn't choose to name green with the Nebula. Okay, yeah, so we're getting Tour of Blues' hand and the top of his deck. Alright, I'm going to end the recording here, but I just want to say, like, I think both these decks are very cool. I like the Vedlinn Ross tech that Blues is running because it's definitely a very cool card. Being able to take your opponent's stuff is always sweet, and copying stuff is always sweet. I think that this matchup in particular is pretty hard for Blues because Blues relies on a lot of like either cheap non-creature spells that cantrip, and those get kind of hosed by Lodestone Golem and Whistling Chalice, or expensive spells that, you know, gradually generate value, and those get kind of hosed by the same thing. So, anywho, that was the match between CanterburyEgg and BluesEclipse. CanterburyEgg moves on to the semifinals. Until next time, this is Dodger, signing off.